$1 million says you couldn't last a month married to a broke girl from the streets. Damian Cole had never believed in love. Not because he'd been heartbroken or jaded by some tragic affair. No, Damian didn't believe in love because he didn't believe in illusions, and to him, that's all it was. A chemical high. A convenient distraction. A power game dressed in poetry. The yacht swayed gently under the moonlight, anchored somewhere between Monaco and the edge of excess. Billionaires, heirs, and tech prodigies laughed over clinking glasses of crystal. Damian leaned back in his lounge chair, dark eyes scanning the horizon like a general at rest. 31, ruthless, razor-sharp mind. The kind of man who broke companies as easily as promises. He was untouchable and he knew it. You honestly think every relationship is a transaction? Derek Langston, heir to a real estate empire, tilted his head, amused. I don't think it, Damian replied, sipping his scotch. I know it. The woman just changes her price depending on how desperate she is. A few chuckles rippled through the circle, but Derek raised a brow. So you've never been in love? Never been foolish enough. That was when it began, the challenge. Perhaps it was the alcohol or the ambient cruelty of the elite, but someone, maybe Derek, maybe another trust fund brat, leaned in with a grin. All right then, Derek said. Here's the game. 1 month. You marry a woman from the streets. Someone broke. No prenup. No guards. Live with her in your penthouse. No assistants, no staff. Just you and love. Laughter followed, but Damian didn't flinch. And what do I get? $1 million. And our silence if you fail. He looked down at his drink, then back up, eyes glittering with mischief. Make it $500,000 if I win. I don't need the money. Just the satisfaction. Done. And just like that, the bet was made. Lila Moore wiped her hands on her apron as she entered the penthouse suite. It was too clean already, polished like a museum. But she wasn't there to clean today. Not really. She had expected this moment to feel heavier. After all, it had taken years to build up to it. A string of odd jobs. A forged resume. A chance interview with his high-end housekeeping agency. And finally, that phone call, you're assigned to Damian Cole's residence. She thought her knees might give out. But they didn't. Because Lila had trained herself to stop feeling long ago. He didn't recognize her when he walked in. Why would he? Gone was the girl with scraped knees and dreams scribbled on library paper. Gone was the child who once built a treehouse with him in an overgrown backyard, swearing they'd never leave each other. Now, she was 28, elegant in her silence, dressed in a pressed uniform and walking on marble floors she once imagined in bedtime stories. He noticed her. Looked at her twice. There was something too poised about her. Housekeepers didn't usually move like ballet dancers. You're new, he said, voice crisp but curious. Yes, she replied, not looking up. Lila. Lila, he repeated the name, almost as if it rang a forgotten bell. Have we met? No, sir, she lied, steady as stone. He watched her a moment longer, then nodded. I'll need to speak with you privately. She followed him into his study, his real sanctuary hidden behind glass walls and old bookshelves. He didn't sit. Neither did she. I have a proposition, he said. Of course you do, she thought. I need a wife. Temporarily. For exactly 1 month. No intimacy required. No expectations. Just public appearances and domestic proximity. In return, I'll pay you $500,000. Cash. Clean. He waited for a reaction. She gave him none. And, she asked. There's only one condition, he added. You will never ask about the arrangement. Or about me. She smiled. Then let me set a condition of my own. He lifted an eyebrow. You can never ask about my past. Not once. Not in jokes or drunken curiosity. If you can agree to that, I'll marry you. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or something older. You're quite comfortable with this for a housekeeper. Lila gave a practiced shrug. I've learned that comfort is a luxury. And I don't chase luxuries anymore. He stared at her, as if trying to unpeel something. but she'd already wrapped herself in just enough mystery to disarm him. Deal. They shook hands. And just like that, Lila Moore became Lila Cole. The wedding was private, efficient, and cold. The media had caught wind within hours. Billionaire Damian Cole marries housekeeper. Is it love or madness? She wore a simple ivory dress. He wore black as always. At the altar, they exchanged no vows. No real ones, anyway. I do, she said, voice even. So do I, he said, offering a faint smile. A photographer captured their kiss, posed, rehearsed. But his hand lingered at the small of her back a moment too long. Afterward, they rode in silence. The car windows were tinted, but she could feel the flashing cameras outside. This won't be difficult, he said. Not for me, she replied. You really don't care what people think? Only when it costs me something. He turned to look at her then, and for a second, just a second, there was something familiar in the way her mouth curved. Like the echo of a childhood memory that refused to be named. They now shared a home, a bedroom, and a lie. Damian spent most of his time locked away in his study or in video meetings with investors. He was as cold as his reputation, and Lila did nothing to warm him. But she moved through his space like she belonged there. Sometimes he caught her gazing out the window, whispering to herself. Other times, he'd find her in the kitchen making tea, always the same kind he liked as a boy. It unsettled him. You know, he said one evening, watching her from the doorway, most women would be trying to seduce me by now. She didn't look up. I'm not most women. No, he agreed. You're not. Lila wandered into his childhood room. He had replicated it exactly, right down to the blue walls, the wooden desk, and the treehouse sketch on the bulletin board. Her throat tightened. You remembered, she whispered. She picked up a small, broken bracelet from the drawer, faded blue beads, a child's trinket. He had once given it to her the night before he left. She tucked it into her apron pocket. Outside, Damian stood watching. He didn't say a word. That night, as Damian slept, Lila stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the city that had swallowed them both. She reached into her apron and pulled out a photo. 2 kids on a swing set, legs kicking skyward, eyes full of dreams. He had left without goodbye. Now he had brought her back, without knowing. Lila, whispering, You don't recognize me, Damian. But I never forgot you. Not for a second. She folded the photo and slipped it under her pillow. Outside, the city lights blinked like secrets. She knew every room in his mansion. Because once, they dreamed of building it together. The morning after the wedding, the penthouse felt different. Not colder. No, it had always been cold, but charged. As if silence had weight now. As if the walls themselves were watching, waiting. Lila woke up before Damian, slipping out of the massive bed without making a sound. Her side was barely creased, a visual metaphor for their marriage. Pristine, untouched. She walked barefoot to the kitchen, lit only by the soft amber hue of sunrise spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She made tea. Not just any tea. His tea. Jasmine with a touch of honey. Not because he asked. He never asked. But because he liked it that way since he was 10. Back when he still had feelings in his eyes. She took 2 mugs from the cabinet, but halfway to the counter, she paused. Not yet. He didn't deserve familiarity. She poured only one and left the kitchen. Damian found her in the living room an hour later. She was curled on the edge of the couch, a book open on her lap, her dark hair catching the light like an oil painting. You read classics? He asked, mildly surprised. Lila didn't look up. Only the ones that end in tragedy. They're more honest. He raised an eyebrow and walked past her, heading for the kitchen. Moments later, she heard his voice echo down the hallway. You made tea. I did. You knew my blend. Lucky guess. But her hands trembled slightly on the page. It was a charity gala at the Sterling, a skyscraper of opulence. Cameras, donors, influencers, and speculation. Lila wore an emerald satin gown that clung to her like memory. Damian, in a dark tailored suit, didn't take his eyes off her, not once from the car to the ballroom. They walked in like royalty, king and queen of a fabricated fairy tale. Smile like you mean it, he whispered through his teeth. I never smile for lies, she whispered back. Yet she did, because she had learned long ago that sometimes deception is survival. Inside, people stared. A few whispered behind champagne glasses. She was a housekeeper, right? Maybe she's a secret heiress. He must have lost a bet. Damien played the role perfectly, hand at her back, glass in hand, effortless charm on his tongue. But Lila knew him. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he clenched his jaw between jokes. He hated this. Being vulnerable. Being watched. Being questioned. You're uncomfortable, she said under her breath as a politician rambled at the mic. I'm fine. You always say that when you're not. His eyes flicked to her. And how would you know that? Lucky guess. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lila stood at the balcony, pulling pins from her hair. Do you regret it? Damien asked behind her. Regret what? This arrangement. She turned slowly. Should I? He studied her. You're not like other women. You keep saying that. But maybe you just don't know many women at all. He laughed, a short, surprised sound. Then he took a step closer. What's your story, Lila? You don't act like someone who cleans toilets for a living. And you don't act like someone who believes in anything. I don't. Then don't ask for my story. You might find a part of yourself in it. She walked past him without another word. He didn't follow. It started around midnight, thunder rumbling low, then sharp flashes of lightning over the skyline. Lila had always loved storms. As a child, she used to sit in a blanket fort and count the seconds between lightning and thunder. Damien had sat beside her, arms around her shoulders. If we stay really quiet, the storm won't hear us, he used to whisper. That memory hit her now like a fist. She walked into the living room, half expecting the power to flicker. Instead, she found Damien seated on the floor, back against the wall, a half-empty glass beside him. No phone. No laptop. No armor. Just him. Alone. Can't sleep? She asked softly. He looked up. His expression wasn't cold this time. Just tired. You ever feel like you've built a life so high you forgot the ground? She moved closer and sat beside him. All the time, she said. They sat in silence, thunder crackling outside. After a moment, she pulled the throw blanket from the couch and wrapped it around them both. His shoulders stiffened, but then relaxed. This reminds me of something, he murmured. Like what? He didn't answer, just stared at the storm. She turned her face away so he wouldn't see the tears threatening to fall. The next morning, Damien stepped into the hallway and froze. Lila was in the kitchen again, barefoot, humming. It wasn't the humming that stopped him. It was the tune. A lullaby. One no one should know but him. He leaned on the doorframe, brows drawn. That song. Where did you hear it? She didn't turn around. Nowhere. No, I know that song. My mother used to sing it to me. It's not common. Maybe it was just in the air, she said lightly, plating toast. No, he said, stepping forward. How do you know that? She set the plate down. You're not allowed to ask about my past, remember? He stopped, trapped by his own condition. Frustration flickered in his chest. He hated the unknown. But he hated breaking his own rules even more. Right? He muttered, backing off. Fine. But the melody haunted him all day. A backyard, wild with weeds. 2 children sat under a half-built wooden frame of what was meant to be a treehouse. When we're grown-ups, young Lila said, we'll build a mansion just like this, but bigger. And no one will make us leave. We'll live in it together, young Damien replied. Forever. Promise. Promise. Damien couldn't shake the feeling. She was too familiar. Not in looks, but in rhythm. In instinct. The way she filled silence. The way she never rushed. The things she noticed. No stranger could know the things she knew. He sat in his office that night, a dozen tabs open on his screen. Background checks, public records, employment history. But her trail was too clean. Too perfect. He hated that. As days blurred into nights, Damien found himself looking for her. He told himself it was because she was interesting, maybe suspicious. But it wasn't that. It was the way she filled the apartment with something invisible. Something warm. When she wasn't around, the penthouse felt like a museum. When she was, it felt haunted by hope. They began having dinner together. Not scheduled. Not agreed upon. Just habits that formed. She would cook something simple. He'd join her. They wouldn't always talk, but they didn't need to. Sometimes silence between two people says more than 1,000 words. It happened in the hallway. She tripped on the corner of a rug, and he caught her instinctively. Their faces were inches apart. The world seemed to still. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low. "Yes," she breathed, her chest rising and falling against his. He didn't let go immediately. And she didn't move. Then, just as fast, he pulled back. "Sorry," he muttered. "You're not," she whispered. But he was already walking away. In her room, Lila stared at the old photograph again, her and Damien as children, muddy from rain, grinning with missing teeth. This wasn't what she planned. She had come here to see if he changed. To punish him. To expose his arrogance. To remind him of what he left behind. But now, she saw cracks in the ice. She saw the boy she once loved flickering behind the man he became. And worst of all, she felt herself wanting to forgive him. One evening, Damien stood at the balcony, watching the city light up. Lila joined him quietly, a blanket over her shoulders. "When you were a kid," she said, "did you ever imagine what your life would look like?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But it didn't look like this." "What did it look like?" He hesitated. "It had someone in it. Someone I used to know. I think I forgot her name." She smiled sadly. "Maybe it's not forgotten. Just buried." He turned to look at her. "Lila." But before he could say more, his phone buzzed. A message from Derek. "The footage is almost ready. The world's going to love your little stunt." Damien's stomach sank. He had forgotten about the bet. Lila watched his face shift, and she knew something was coming. Something big. Something that might ruin everything. She was never a stranger. She was the memory he buried. The storm didn't come from the sky this time. It came from the silence. From a drawer, half open, in a room he rarely entered. Damien wasn't looking for answers when he stepped into the guest bedroom Lila used. He was looking for his own misplaced cufflinks. That's what he told himself. But when he opened the drawer, what he found was not cufflinks. It was a bracelet. A cheap, rusted thing with blue beads, dull now with time. But he knew it immediately. Because he'd made it. He had stayed up late, stringing the beads together with plastic thread. He'd written the letters LA in shaky marker on the back of a dolphin charm. She loved dolphins back then. "Now you can't ever forget me," he said, tying it around her wrist under the summer moon. "You'll come back, right?" she asked. "Promise," he whispered. "I'll come back. We'll be rich one day. And we'll live in a mansion. And you'll never marry anyone else?" "Never." But 2 weeks later he left. And he never came back. The bracelet in his hand felt heavier than metal. It scorched his palm with the weight of memory. Damien sat down on the edge of the bed, unable to breathe. It couldn't be. It couldn't. But it was. Everything began to rearrange in his mind. The lullaby. The storm. The humming. Her touch. The way she watched him sometimes, not like a stranger, not even like a wife, but like someone who had known him once and didn't quite recognize him anymore. She wasn't new. She was history. She was Lila Moore. He waited for her that night. She walked into the penthouse wearing a soft gray sweater, holding a book in one hand and a mug in the other. Like nothing had shifted. But when she saw his face, her smile faded. He was standing by the fireplace. And in his hand, the bracelet. "Where did you get this?" His voice was low. Dangerous. Lila froze. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said quietly. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell." "You knew who I was the entire time." "Yes." "Then who are you?" She looked at him, something unraveling behind her eyes. Then, slowly she set down her book, her mug. Walked toward him like she was walking toward a grave. "You really don't remember?" "I remember now." He stepped closer. I remember the blanket fort. I remember the treehouse. I remember your laugh. But you forgot me, she whispered. I was 12. My mother pulled me out of that house overnight. She didn't give me time to say goodbye. You had years to come back. But you didn't. Because I thought you were gone. I thought you were. You didn't look. Silence. Thick. Bitter. Why now? He asked. Why pretend to be a housekeeper? Why marry me for a month? Lila's eyes burned. Because I needed to know if the boy I loved was still alive inside the man who broke me. That hit him harder than a slap. You wanted revenge? No. I wanted truth. But then, I saw you. And I hated how much I still cared. Damien stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I used you. Yes, she said, voice calm but sharp. For a bet. $1 million. A joke to your friends. He turned away, ashamed. I didn't know it was you. But it was me. And I was nothing more than a challenge to win. The next morning it happened. Damien was on a conference call when his assistant burst in. You need to see this. The footage. His friends, Derek, Nolan, Pierce, had leaked it. The yacht party. The bet. The cameras had caught it all. 1 million says you can't last a month married to a broke girl. Watch me. Clips of Lila scrubbing floors. Walking silently behind him. Sitting beside him at the gala. It was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram. Even the Daily Ledger ran a piece. Billionaire's wife was a bet. Social experiment or exploitation? Damien's PR team panicked. His board threatened his position. Stock dropped 12% in 24 hours. But none of that mattered. Because Lila was gone. She left no note. Just an empty room. A bracelet. And a memory. Damien searched every corner. Called every contact. But she vanished like fog at sunrise. He even drove to the old neighborhood. The one they grew up in. It was still poor. Still forgotten. But no one had seen her. Days blurred. He stopped going to meetings. He turned down interviews. He broke things. Punched walls. Sat for hours on the edge of the same bed where he had found the bracelet. He watched old footage of their dinners. Zoomed in on her face. Why didn't I see it? He murmured. Why didn't I see her? He found her mother's name in a file Lila had left behind. Eleanor Moore. Deceased. But a note had been scribbled on the side. Donations in her name accepted at Sunrise House. A non-profit. An orphanage. The same one they'd both grown up in. The penthouse was silent again. Cold. Damien walked to the balcony. The same place he had once stood with her wrapped in a blanket. The same place he'd first wondered who she really was. He clutched the bracelet in his hand. You were never a stranger, he whispered. You were the best part of me. A tear slid down his cheek and fell unnoticed. Far below, the city pulsed with life. But up here he stood alone. Not as a billionaire. Not as a winner of a bet. But as a man who had lost the only person who ever truly knew him. You don't earn back love with money. You earn it with truth. The penthouse didn't echo the same way it used to. Damien Cole, once the untouchable billionaire, now paced barefoot across his marble floors, stripped of ego, stripped of armor. The chandelier still glittered. The city still blinked beyond the glass walls. But it was all meaningless without her. 2 weeks had passed since Lila vanished. And in that time, Damien had watched his empire begin to rot from the inside out. His board demanded he step down, temporarily. His publicist begged him to release a statement, spin the story, say Lila was a con artist. Paint her as manipulative, they urged. Say she tricked you. You're the victim. But Damien fired them all. I was never the victim, he said. I was the idiot. The media circus raged on. #WifeForBet trended for 9 straight days. But Damien didn't flinch anymore. Not because he didn't care, but because now he cared too much. It had taken 3 days to get there, not geographically, but emotionally. Sunrise House. The orphanage tucked into the outskirts of the city. Red bricks, chipped windows, paint flaking off its nameplate. He parked his black Range Rover far down the block. It felt wrong to bring wealth into this place. The same place where a 7-year-old boy had cried himself to sleep next to a girl with wild hair and scraped knees. He stepped through the doors. The smell hit him first. Dust, old wood, paper, and faint traces of warm soup. A middle-aged woman behind the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," Damien said quietly. "She may be volunteering here. Or donating. Her name is Lila Moore." The woman blinked, then smiled softly. "You're not the first one looking for her. But she left last week. Didn't say where." His shoulders slumped. "Do you know where she went?" The woman hesitated, then reached under her desk. "She left this," she said. "Said if a man ever came looking, a man with sad eyes, to give it to him." She handed him a letter. It wasn't in an envelope. Just a piece of lined paper, folded once. His hands shook as he opened it. "Damien, if you're reading this, it means you came back here. That already says more than you ever could. I didn't disappear to punish you. I left because I couldn't breathe in that world anymore. Your world. The cameras. The contracts. The reminders. You weren't the only one who lost something when you left all those years ago. I lost faith. In people. In promises. In dreams. But I also found something too. I found strength. And I found that love, real love, doesn't always die. Sometimes it just waits. It waits for the truth. You asked me once who I was. I'll tell you now. I'm still the girl who believed in blanket forts. Who believed in you. But I can't believe in a man who won a bet to find me. If you want me, you have to become the man who would have lost everything to keep me." That night, Damien didn't go back to the penthouse. He slept in a motel down the street from Sunrise House. The sheets were thin. The heater groaned. But it felt honest. In the morning, he returned. "I want to volunteer," he told the woman at the front desk. "Every day. As long as you'll have me." She raised a brow. "Can you read stories to 6-year-olds? I can try." Every morning, Damien showed up at 7 a.m. He painted fences. Repaired broken shelves. Took the kids on walks. He helped a quiet boy named Malik learn to tie his shoes. He spent his nights writing, not emails, but apology letters he'd never send. And working with a lawyer to set up a foundation. The Eleanor Moore Initiative. Named after Lila's mother. Funded by the last of Damien's liquidated shares. He was no longer a billionaire. But for once, he felt like he was building something real. 3 months passed before he saw her again. It was a small, countryside town. Far from the city noise. He was there on a delivery run for Sunrise, old books and learning supplies. The bell above the door jingled. And there she was. Behind the counter. Hair pulled back in a messy knot. Reading a paperback novel. A pencil between her teeth. "Lila." She looked up, and froze. Her eyes met his. 1,000 words between them. But neither spoke. He stepped forward, gently placing a small package on the counter. "Donation," he said. "From Eleanor Moore's foundation." She stared. "You started it," she whispered. "It's hers. Not mine. I just helped build it." He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. Pulled out something small. The bracelet. But now it had been restored, polished, restrung, with a new charm next to the old dolphin. A tiny silver heart engraved with "Still Here." "I fixed it," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't reach for it yet. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Because no amount of money could fix what I broke. So I lost it all. I walked away from the board. From the mansion. From the noise. For me. For the truth," he said. "And because I want to be the boy you once believed in. The one who never should have left." She finally took the bracelet. Ran her fingers over it like a relic. "No contracts this time?" she asked. "No lies," he said. "No games. No bets. Just you. Just me." He paused. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I came here because you deserve to know. I remember now. All of it. And I'd rather spend my life trying to be worthy of that memory than forget it ever existed." Lila stared at him. Then, slowly, she reached across the counter. Took his hand. Their fingers laced together like they'd done a lifetime ago beneath a blanket fort. The mansion was sold. The board seat was gone. But the new foundation thrived, helping abandoned kids find homes, voices, and futures. Damien now lived in a modest cottage by the sea. Lila worked in the bookstore, writing children's stories in her spare time. Every morning, they walked down the beach. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't have to. And on her wrist, the bracelet. Still glowing, still whole. "Did I ever tell you," she whispered one morning, "that I still have that photo of us under the blanket fort?" He smiled. "Maybe one day you'll show me." "Maybe," she teased. They stopped by the water. He looked at her, not like a man who won something, but like a man who was finally home. If you enjoyed the story, please do well to subscribe, like, comment and share for more interesting stories.